2017 was a weird year. I mean, top to bottom, it was a weird year. It was a bad year. So much bad stuff happened in 2017. Did you have a baby in 2017? Then you had a bad baby. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. It wasn't a great year. One area that did deliver positivity, though, was video games. Man, oh man, 2017 was a spectacular year for games, giving us not only a phenomenal sandbox fantasy world to explore and a parallel timeline just rife with Nazis, can you imagine, but also giving us a brand new Nintendo console to play them on, one that dropped just a few short years after the relative failure of the Wii U, and get this, 11 years after the incredibly successful launch of the original Wii. Admit it, you feel a little older after hearing that. I certainly did after writing it down, and then again just now after saying it again into this microphone. And hey, here's a did you know moment. The first year of the Switch has dwarfed the Wii's first year by a considerable margin. In fact, it's now the fastest selling console in the US ever, putting Nintendo right back in the the place. It's round, it's where the winner's circle. Yes, I knew I'd get there in the end. The first year of Switch titles has been absolutely gangbusters. I can't think of a single other console with this many hard-hitting strong boys put out for it inside of the first 12 months of the thing, and yet here we are. But the Switch wasn't the only thing that happened in gaming this year, and my job today here at youtube.com/FilmJoy is to give you a rundown of my favourite quintuplet of video game releases from the previous calendar year, or my Fave 5 of 2017, to use, shorter words. So, without any further etc., first, let's get those honourable mentions out of the way. Thimbleweed Park marks the triumphant return to the adventure game genre for Monkey Island creator Ron Gilbert, and what a return. It's Twin Peaks meets the X-Files by way of Maniac Mansion with a gentle sprinkling of Are You Afraid of the Dark? No, just me, alright then. This is a game that sets its tone quickly and brilliantly, and while it doesn't do anything particularly revolutionary with the adventure game genre, it doesn't really need to. Thimbleweed Park fills a gap in the genre that's been largely absent for the last, 8 years since Telltale Games moved away from producing traditional point-and-click adventures and shifted towards more action-oriented decision simulators. That's not strictly speaking a bad move, and there's no doubt that Telltale has had phenomenal success with the format, but it's left a gap for those of us who grew up clicking on every square inch of screen real estate looking for some manner of thing we could pick up on the off chance it might help us with a puzzle later. Sure, I'll take this placard, maybe I'll never use it, but hey, maybe I will. Plus, I have infinite inventory space, so f*** it. Thimbleweed Park absolutely scratched that adventure game itch for me, and not only was it a long time coming, but man was it a satisfying scratch. This is easily the game I've spent the most time with over the last year, and the only reason it didn't make it into this list is that it's not technically a 2017 game. That's right, I'm excluding it because it's a port. What has happened to me? Mario Kart 8 originally dropped for the Wii U back in 2014, and while it was easily the best-selling Wii U game of all time, that's a bit like being the best singer in Steps. Oh, I guess that was too obscure a reference. Maybe I should pick something a little more No, I'm sticking with it. Okay, you can infer what I mean from the context. Nintendo have been fine-tuning the formula for Mario Kart since the Super Nintendo original, and with the exception of a single brief experimental excursion that honestly I still wish had influenced the series more, they've gradually honed and perfected the franchise to this. It's damn near perfect, and easily my go-to game when I have downtime. This next honourable mention is potentially going to piss off quite a lot of people. This is a game that I'm sure people would have put money on being my game of the year. Indeed, anyone who had to listen to me talk about the development of this game over the last 2 years is probably angrily scowling at their monitor screaming, "What do you mean it's just an honourable mention?" And I get it, this is a difficult decision to pass and one I really struggled with. I absolutely adore this game. It's like an interactive Studio Ghibli movie in terms of look and feel and flavour. It's arguably the most beautiful game ever made. I think it's a strong contender for one of the greatest games ever made. made. But apart from that, I think I could make a strong case for this being the only 3D Zelda game that does good by the formula set out by the original 2D games way back when. It's the first game in a long time to capture that feeling of exploration and discovery that drew me to those early games in the first place, elements that I believe were sorely lacking in other 3D entries in the series. Don't get me wrong, Ocarina of Time is still a spectacular game in every regard, but it never really felt like a Zelda game to me. Even Wind Waker's deep sea dives and oceanic exploration felt like a poor stand-in for the vivid, varied worlds presented in the game's 2D entries. And I love Wind Waker, it's one of my favourite games ever. Man, I hope that HD port gets put out for the Switch. Breath of the Wild feels like a natural progression of the Zelda I grew up with, and it's been a long time coming, but as much as I love it, I haven't actually spent that much time with it. There's so much to do, so much to see Hey Now You're an All-Star, and I find that incredibly daunting. I don't doubt that I'll dive into it properly at some point when I'm ready, but right now the sheer depth of Breath of the Wild is intimidating. I look forward to eventually overcoming my weakness and exploring Hyrule in all its glory someday. Now, onto the list proper. When I was a kid, Sensible World of Soccer was the only sports game that held my attention. It takes the fundamentals of soccer and simplifies them in the most elegant, accessible way. But by the time the noughties rolled around, soccer games like this one very quickly gave way to more realistic fare like FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer, and those games are, you know, fine, but my heart has been crying out for a nice, simple, accessible soccer game for years. Honestly, go search through my tweets for the word soccer and see what comes up. I whinge about this at least once a year. Well, my whinging days are over with the Steam Early Access release of Sociable Soccer. Though it's still in development and there are still bugs to be ironed out and features to be added, the meat already on these bones is more than enough to sate my primal desire for a more arcadey soccer game in the style of Sensible Soccer. And that's no surprise, the game is very much a spiritual sequel to my lost childhood love, headed up as it is by former Sensible Software dudesman John Hare, seen here taking a passport photo that does not meet acceptable government guidelines. Playing Sociable Soccer immediately took me back to being 10 years old, sat in front of my Amiga 1200, joystick in hand, punting balls across fields and trying desperately to sneak a ball past that fastidious goalkeeper, and that would be reason alone for the game to slide into my top 5, but even aside from that, it's just fun. You could probably make an argument for this being a more casual soccer game, and you're probably right, but I've never thought of the word casual as a dirty word. A lot of games that we love would be considered casual games if they came out today. Lemmings is arguably the prime example of this. If this had been released as a mobile game today, instead of almost 30 years ago, it'd be written off as a game for people who don't play games. But it dominated the early 90s and was one of the best-selling games of that entire decade. Sociable Soccer might be more casual, but that's good. One of the barriers for entry for games like FIFA and Pro Evo, for me at least, is that they're much more technical than I care to invest in. I'm not interested in that. All I want is a game where I can pass the ball or shoot the ball, and Sociable Soccer absolutely covers those bases. This is a game where if you want, you can play it with just one analog stick and a single button. You shouldn't, but you can. I love that. I love anything and everything that makes this game approachable and accessible. It still has a way to go, but it very quickly became one of my favourite games of last year, and I cannot wait to see it blossom and evolve through 2018. There are games that are fun, and then there are games that make good on a childhood dream. And then there are games like Star Trek Bridge Crew, which not only fulfilled my lifelong desire to serve on the bridge of a Starfleet vessel, but also achieved something remarkable. It made me give a damn about virtual reality. I bought the game shortly after Ubisoft dropped that update that lets you play the game with the mouse and keyboard instead of a virtual reality headset, and as I don't own a VR rig, that is predominantly how I've been playing the game. But for the first time, I find myself eyeing prices for VR headsets and seriously considering hopping on the bandwagon. That's quite the achievement. Over the years, I've seen a number of VR titles come and go, none of which have done a lot to grab my attention, from chat applications which strike me as a version of Second Life that obfuscates your first one from view, to VR reissues of games I'm already quite content to play with a controller. It also doesn't help that being gently disabled, the idea of having to stand and walk around a room to play a game doesn't especially thrill me. But Star Trek Bridge Crew is a nice, simple and effective way of taking a relatively simple premise, one that had already been executed on by Artemis some years earlier, though obviously nowhere near as beautifully, and making it simple and accessible. In the game, 4 players take control of the helm, tactical, engineering, and captain positions on the bridge of a Federation starship, working together to complete mission objectives ranging from rescuing survivors to destroying enemy vessels and beyond. It's VR at its simplest, using that headset to immerse you in a simple environment with people all working towards a common goal. I love that. Even without the VR headset though, this game is an absolute blast to play. It's immersive, it's thoroughly enjoyable, and I can't get enough. Cuphead is hell. That's a fact. It's a nightmare dreamscape designed to tear a person down to their base elements and scatter that essence to the 4 corners of the earth. But for as hard as it is, as much as it makes me want to throw the controller off the end of Santa Monica Pier and rip off my own hands, few games can match the feeling of pure elation you feel when you complete a level or finish a boss for the first time. That alone would be enough to carry me through part of the game. It's the bread and butter of all those Nintendo hard games we grew up playing in the 80s and 90s, but that alone can't keep a game afloat. I remember how difficult Alien Hominid was back in the day, and that was certainly a game with its charms, but if I kept losing, I would just quit the game and come back to it later until one day I just stopped coming back to it. Cuphead strikes a firm balance between challenging and rewarding, and it wraps it all in this absolutely gorgeous animation which, as a lifelong fan of cartoons old and new, just thrilled me to bits. In any other game, dying 8,000 times on the same boss fight would end me, but with Cuphead, I want to soldier on and see the next bit of animation, the next beautiful piece of background art. I want to see which old animation techniques they've rolled into the game and what purpose they will serve. You want to know one of my favourite design choices in Cuphead? It's the overworld. The backgrounds are stunningly painted watercolours, while interactive elements are traditionally animated solid colours. Not only is that how moving props and scenery in old cartoons were easily identified in animated flicks, but it's a nice visual shorthand for the player that says, hey, this is a point of interest. That is a fantastic use of vintage animation technique as a visual cue for the player, and I love it. Cuphead could have just been pretty, or it could have just been smart, and instead, it's both, and we're all the better off for it. I won't lie, when this team-up crossover title for the Switch was announced, I balked. I'd never played any of the Rabbids games, knowing them only by reputation as gaming's answer to the minions of Despicable Me, cynically adorable textbook lol so random little shits who were infuriatingly over-marketed. But I was intrigued when the resulting title was revealed to be a turn-based tactical game akin to XCOM or Invisible Ink, and delighted when I discovered the game wasn't just good, but far better than it had any right to be. It was also, like some other games on this list, punishing to play at times. It has a steep difficulty curve, which I'm sure turned a lot of players off pretty early on, but despite this, it remains a thrill to play. While it doesn't always manage to pull off the look of a Nintendo game, it does maintain a character of its own, and that's commendable. Frustratingly difficult at times and lacking a multiplayer mode at launch, although that has since been patched in, Rabbids is another game whose charm has kept me coming back for more, and I enjoy it every time I do. I don't really have much else to say about it other than that. It's a simple, challenging but fun game, and what's more, you can play it on the toilet. What's not to love? In many ways, there are parallels between Sonic Mania and 2015's Star Wars The Force Awakens. Both were highly anticipated new entries in stagnant franchises, both followed a long string of disappointing entries, and both had incredibly, arguably impossibly big expectations to me. But much like the team who toiled away to give us The Force Awakens, the developers of Sonic Mania knew that they had to remind us exactly why we loved Sonic in the first place, while also showing us just where these games can go if given the right amount of love and care. Sonic Mania is a celebration of the franchise past, as well as a call to its future. It opens with a triumphant animated intro that very unsubtly says, yes, this is the true follow-up to the Mega Drive games that you've been waiting for. It eases you into familiar territory before taking you somewhere brand spanking new, and it shows you, and one could argue also shows Sega, that this is what a Sonic game can be and should be. What's more, in the same way that The Force Awakens made me realise I'd always been a fan of Star Wars, Sonic Mania is the game that convinced me that actually Sonic games are a lot deeper than the gotta go fast mad dash to the exit boredom generators I dismissed them as over the years. I won't lie, I've always kind of written Sonic off as an also ran in the console platforming wars of the 90s. Clever joke there, I don't know if you spotted it, but I'll keep going anyway. And I chalked his enduring popularity up to snazzy character design, an admittedly very entertaining Saturday morning cartoon, and a shockingly well-written comic book series. Sure, I played the games multiple times, just like I'd seen the original Star Wars trilogy dozens upon dozens of times, but I never felt I had any kind of emotional attachment to it. And then it happened. A moment came that crystallized for me just how important Sonic was to me. Not just the game I was playing, but the entire series. Sonic Mania didn't make me fall in love with Sonic the Hedgehog. It made me realise I'd always loved these games by showing me just what makes them magical. And it took a team of indie developers who produced this game as a labour of love to realise that actually, yeah, Sonic isn't just a hedgehog with attitude. He's the central character in a really fun, thoroughly enjoyable series of video games that are a lot deeper than they appear at first glance. This is not a franchise defined by its failures. It's certainly affected by them, coloured by them, but those missteps, big as they are, aren't what people remember about the franchise. Because when it comes down to it, what we love is much more important than what we don't. And there is a lot to love about Sonic Mania. Last bit's going to sound a bit hoarse because I have a bit of a sore throat, but thank you for watching. That was my Fave 5 for 2017 in no particular order. Let me know in the comments what your favourite game of 2017 was. I'll be back next time with a brand new episode looking at the Amiga versions of Street Fighter 2, and I also just recently launched a new podcast called The Life Toyetic with my friend Molly Alice Hoy, where we look at movies that are based on toys. We've done 2 episodes so far, one on the 2016 movie Trolls, and one on the 1987 He-Man Masters of the Universe live action movie, so do check those out. In the meantime, I'm going to go and have a lozenge. Bye-bye.